Hope everyone's having a pleasant morning. We are driving out towards Denver and did about a 900 plus mile test yesterday, 925 miles. And a lot of people have asked, is it possible to drive 7 or 8 or 900 miles or even 1,000 miles in a day in an electric car? And the answer is absolutely. It just depends on the car. And this car, the 2020 Model S Tesla Long Range Plus, is more than capable of doing a 7 or 8 or 900 plus mile day, even 1,000 miles, depending on the circumstances. And by way of illustration, yesterday we started out from eastern Ohio. I think it's called Cambridge, Ohio, right by the border with West Virginia. Like where Wheeling, West Virginia sort of comes up in between Pennsylvania and Ohio in that little slice of land there. And at about 6 in the morning, and drove 925 miles through Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Kansas, and Missouri, and about the eastern half of Kansas. And this car did it in complete comfort and complete safety. And it was an absolute pleasure. And it wasn't even trying that hard. Didn't even have to keep the speed down. I was able to go whatever speed I wanted to. Usually that meant in the high 70s or low 80s. Essentially keeping up with the flow of traffic. And there's 4 reasons why this car can do it. Not a lot of cars can do it, especially not a lot of AVs. And for a regular car, a gas engine car, or a pickup truck, it's not the most comfortable thing if you don't have what's called a self-driving or a car with an ADAS, Automated Driver Assistance System. And that just means something that does the steering and the acceleration and the braking for you. Because it's very, very hard to focus and concentrate for that long and do, and manage the vehicle for every second of every minute of a 14 plus hour day on the road. That's monumentally hard, and you're exhausted by the end of the day. In a car that can drive itself, like a Tesla with autopilot, or like the Ford pickups that have lane centering and lane keeping and adaptive cruise control. More and more cars are coming out with that feature. I know the Honda minivans have it. We rented one. But that makes it possible to do it comfortably. You would not want to drive that long without an ADAS, Automated Driver Assistance System. And the best one out there is the Tesla Autopilot, even though they have disabled the radar on the newer ones. And so it's 100% vision or camera based. And people have complained a lot about it. We have had no issues with it. It drives the car just fine on sunny days like you see here, at night, on rainy days, and even on rainy nights. And we've experienced all 4 of those conditions, and the car does just fine. Yesterday, for instance, driving through Indiana, it was raining torrentially, and you were having a hard time making out the traffic ahead of you. You were having something of a hard time making out the lane dividers, and the autopilot did just fine. Absolutely fine. There were a few times when it slowed down a little bit because it said speed restricted, autopilot speed restricted due to limited visibility, something like that. And it slowed it down from like 65 to 55. And that's about as fast as you would want to go. So it was not being overly cautious. It also wasn't being reckless. The system, again, just camera-based, does a very, very good job. And there were very few times when we had to second-guess it and intervene and take over. Virtually none. And there were also very, very few times, in fact, I'm going to say basically none, where it did that thing called phantom braking and it slammed on the brakes. A lot of people say if the color of the pavement changes or if there's like shadows or something, the car will freak out and slam on the brakes because it thinks you're about to hit a wall or something. And we have not had that happen. We've had this car 9 days now. Well, 8 full days. And driven close to 2,000 miles in that time. And it has not done that. And so it's just not a concern for people who are worried because they keep hearing oh, Tesla did this moronic thing and disabled the radar, and now the system is unsafe to drive. And there's a lot of rumors and a lot of innuendo going about that. And it's just not the case. So that's requirement number one for a very, very long day on the road. To do it comfortably and safely. Number two, at least if you're a solo driver, and you're going to be behind the wheel for 14 plus hours during the day. Number two, in an electric car specifically, it's got to have a very big battery. This car, again, the Model S Tesla Long Range Plus, has a 100 plus kilowatt hour battery. That's about the biggest battery that has been put in a car. I know the Ford Lightning pickup truck and the Hummer EV and the new Chevy Silverado electric pickup truck is going to have a much bigger battery than that. But in a car, again, the Tesla, with the exception of maybe the Lucid or whatever, but nobody buys those. In terms of mainstream EVs, the Model S and the Model X have the biggest battery that's been put into an EV. And then the third thing it's got to have is it's got to charge fast, because your battery is not going to last all day, no matter how big it is. And so when it finally does run down, you need it to be able to charge exceptionally fast so you can get back on the road. And I'll tell you, this battery, it charges crazy fast. It charges insanely fast. Very nice view, by the way. We're driving through like the central part of Kansas right now. We just left, I think they call it Salina, not Selena, about a half hour ago. It's like 10 past 7 in the morning on a Sunday. Very, very, very pretty out here. But when you inevitably have to pull over and charge your car, you want to know that it's going to charge fast so you can get back on the road. And it's got to have that combination of a large battery and fast charging, for a reason I'll explain in a minute. And then the fourth thing it has to be highly efficient in terms of its aerodynamics and in terms of its powertrain and the rolling resistance and so on and so forth. The type of motor that it uses, induction versus permanent magnet, that makes a difference. And again, this car has all four of those things. It's got autopilot / full self-driving. It's got a very large battery. It's got very fast charging, and it's highly efficient in terms of its usage of energy. And those four things make it about the perfect long-range road trip car. Just about perfect. I mean, the one thing it can't do is like tow a big heavy trailer, because it's not a truck. But we're not complaining, because we've got trucks for that, and we love them. And that's just something then this is not going to be able to do. But again, to those who are wondering, is this a comfortable car for taking long road trips with the family? Maybe driving, 600 or 800 miles down to Florida and going to Universal or something. Maybe going to Key West. Maybe going cross country through the Rockies. Maybe going to Yellowstone or what have you. Are we going to be stranded in the middle of nowhere because we can't find a place to charge it? And the answer is you have nothing to worry about if you've got that combination of those four elements. And we picked the Model S for a reason. Spent a lot of time looking at the different Teslas, and the Model Y is the best-selling. It's actually the best-selling car on the planet right now in the first half of 2023. Tesla sold about 500,000 cars in just the second quarter, and they're growing exponentially. They're growing something like 50% a year every year, and it's a good car. We've rented it a couple times. It drives well. We don't like the fact that it's got no dashboard, no instrument panel right in front of you, because it's kind of a hassle to look over all the time, and anytime you want to check your speed or whatnot. And it doesn't have all the stalks and the the controls. It doesn't have like a switch for the windshield wipers, I don't think, the way this one does, because this is the old school, the original interior for a Model S. And so, and the other thing is that the longest range Model Y that you can get, Tesla, has a 330 mile range, meaning a 330 mile EPA range. That is not your real world range. Same thing with the Model 3, the long range Model 3. It's in the 300s. They're like the low to mid 300s. And the problem with the Model 3 is that it's got no room. It's like a subcompact. It's a tiny little car. And if you're a 6-footer, and if you got kids that are older than about 7 or 8 years old, and you need to carry a lot of stuff with you everywhere you go, the trunk is healthy size, but it's not as big as we would need. And the back seats don't have the kind of room we would need for teenagers, 15-year-olds, that kind of thing, when they're sitting behind a 6-footer. And so it just doesn't have the room we need. The Model Y has all the room in the world, but again, neither one of those cars has the range we need, because the EPA range is in the low to mid 300s. Same thing with the Model X, okay? And the Model X, which is the top of the line Tesla, the SUV, based on the Model S, it doesn't have those 4 elements. It's got a big battery, but it doesn't have the efficiency that this car does, the Model S. And so, even with the same battery, the 100 plus kilowatt hour battery, it does not have the range that the Model S does. And so the Model S, again, has 400 plus miles of range, 402 miles of EPA range in the 2020. The 21, 22, and 23, I think it's up to 405 miles, whatever. That's just your EPA range. Your real world range is going to be closer to 250 to 300 miles, as we've discussed previously. And that's what you need in this car, in an electric car. Because again, the Model 3, the Model Y with 330, whatever their range is, EPA range, that translates into a real world range of like 200 to 220, give or take. Maybe 250 if you really, really stretch it out. And so it's just not going to work for us. And this right here, the Model S, is the only car that's got a big enough battery and it's efficient enough to where, with the EPA range of 400 miles, the real world cruising range is between 250 and 300. If that makes sense. And so yesterday, we left out again from Eastern Ohio, drove for about 4 hours before we made our first charging stop. 3.5, 4 hours. And then from that point forward, the plan was to stop every 2 hours for like 10 or 15 minutes and get back on the road. Because the idea was, well, you're going to need to, as a human being, you're going to need to take a rest stop about every 2 hours at most. And so we could just time the car's charging stops to the driver's pit stops, if that makes sense. But it didn't work out that way, because the driver, the endurance, the biological endurance, if you know what I'm talking about, if you're middle-aged, is the limiting factor. And the driver needs to stop more often for bathroom breaks. And that's what slowed us down more than anything yesterday, not the car. The car was never in a condition where it needed to stop and the driver didn't, meaning me. It was always the condition that the driver needed to stop. And so we essentially had to time the charging stops to coincide with the driver's, meaning my, pit stops. And so that was kind of a revelation. Again, this car is not the limiting factor in your ability to do a long drive. And if the driver, meaning me, if I hadn't needed to take as many breaks as I did, we could have done 1,000 miles yesterday easily. And instead we did 925, and that's still respectable. That's highly respectable. But again, in the year 2023, with the state of technology and development of these cars, the limiting factor is the driver, not the car. And so that would have been the same problem in a gas or diesel powered sedan or pickup truck. Now, if you're in your 20s and 30s and you don't need to stop that often, well, then it's a different story. Then you're driving about 2 hours, stopping for about 10 or 15 minutes, charging the car, getting back on the road. And the observation in terms of charging is this. If you've got a newer Tesla, meaning a Model S or X that is newer than about 2019 or 2020, it'll charge as fast as you need. Whether or not you're at one of the what's called the V2 Tesla superchargers, the 250 kilowatt Tesla superchargers, you don't actually need those. It'll charge about as fast as you need at one of the original superchargers, which is rated at, I think, 150 kilowatts. So you don't need to seek out religiously the newer and faster ones. Because if you time it, and we talked about it previously, to where you start the day at 90%, and you run it down by 75, from 90 down to 15%. So you're using about the middle 75% of the battery. Stop and charge it at 15%. It will go from 15% back up to 50% in 10 or 15 minutes. Call it 15 minutes. You will get 150 miles of range in 15 minutes of charging. And then get back on the road. And don't wait for it to charge all the way back up to 90, because to go from 15% to 50% takes 15 minutes. To go from 50% to 90%, your speed gets cut in half. It takes about a half an hour. So again, the first, the first boost of 150 miles from 15 to 50% in this car takes 15 minutes, and then it slows down substantially to get back up to 90%. It's not another 15 minutes, it's another 30 minutes. So you don't want to waste, you don't want to go, it's not worth your time to wait for it to go all the way back up to 90%, because your speed is cut in half, your charging speed, once you get over about 50, maybe 60%. So just get back on the road, drive another 2 hours, and then stop and charge. And I guarantee you, the driver, will need to stop before the car needs to stop. And so what you're doing is you're looking at the map, you're doing you're messing with the navigation, and you are finding Tesla chargers that are essentially that you time in accordance with your need to take pit stops, and you charge the car accordingly. Never had to sit for more than 15 minutes yesterday on account of the car needing to charge. There was a point, I want to say in Effingham, Illinois, we were just tired. We had to take a pause for the cause, and so that was like a 30-minute stop. It started the day a little bit short on sleep. And then kind of had our second wind, got back on the road. And so that's the biggest limiting factor. The second thing is weather. In Indiana, pretty much across the entire state, it was raining torrentially. And then once we got through Indiana towards, crossed over into Illinois, the rain stopped. And then the second external event that happened was we were passing through Kansas City, and we'd just gotten back on the highway. We'd stopped at a Bass Pro Shops, an outdoor, Outdoor World, or whatever it's called, and got back on the road, and the highway was stopped, almost completely stopped in both directions, going into the stadium there, Arrowhead Stadium. And at first we thought it was a Kansas City Royals game, which I think plays next to Arrowhead Stadium. At least it did 20 years ago, the last time we went to a game there. And it turned out, no, it was a Taylor Swift concert. And it was at Arrowhead Stadium. And the traffic was, like, again, bringing the interstate completely to a stop in both directions. And the police had to sort of route the through traffic around it. And so if it wasn't for Taylor Swift in Kansas City, and if it wasn't for that rain in Indiana, again, we would have gone even farther, 950 miles, 975 miles. And again, the bathroom breaks were killing us. So for somebody in better, you know, who's in your whatever, in your prime, you're in your 20s and 30s, you're not guzzling coffee and Diet Coke or whatever you drink, staying hydrated, so on and so forth. Yeah, you can easily do a 1,000-mile day. I'm gonna say you could do an 1,100-mile day in this car, without sweating bullets, without having to get dangerous, you know. And by dangerous, we mean going 100 plus in heavy traffic. And if you've got two drivers, I mean, God, you could go 1,200 plus miles in a day. But it's going to be a long, long day. You're talking about 6 a.m. until after midnight. We're talking about an 18-hour day. But it's possible. And again, with two drivers, it's not just possible and safe, but it's not even that hard. Because you're taking shifts, you know, maybe you're taking 3-hour shifts or 2-hour shifts or whatever. Very, very easy. And you're not fatigued. You're not making bad decisions, and you're not, you know, strung out, and you're not a zombie by the end of the day. All right, well, I don't want to belabor the point, but again, you got to have those 4 elements in a car if you're going to do a long, long drive, 700, 800, 900 plus miles, maybe 1,000 miles, maybe even farther. You got to have a car with a self-driving system, and in this car, it's called autopilot. You don't need the full self-driving. All you need is the basic Tesla autopilot that comes with every Tesla. And if it's an EV, you got to have a big, big battery. You got to have fast charging speed, and you got to have an efficient powertrain. Those 4 elements together make this the perfect road trip car. And as we saw yesterday, going 925 miles in a day, it's the perfect long distance road trip car. All right, well, thanks everyone. Have a great day, and we will talk to you later. Hope you're enjoying the summer, because it's flying by relentlessly. Talk to you later.